Let's see why hundreds of Russian tanks were heavily damaged or destroyed during the invasion of Ukraine. Some sources say this incident is related to the poor design of their tanks so that it could trigger a paralysis faster for the troops. One of them became a victim, namely the T-72 main battle tank belonging to Russia, which was experiencing difficulties on the Ukrainian battlefield. Many photos and videos show this tank being heavily damaged by the opponent's anti-tank missiles. Officials from the British Defense Secretary, Ben Wallace, said there were about 580 Russian tanks that had been destroyed while facing Ukraine. Most of the heavily damaged were T-72 tanks. T-72 with the seating position of the troops is very close to the ammunition storage, so the fire from enemy anti-tank missiles is very explosive when sliding towards the target of this tank. When facing Ukraine, this Russian flagship tank is often targeted by mines, drones, and of course Javelin, Stugna, and NLAW anti-tank guided missiles that complicate the T-72 with all its variants. This armored vehicle has been in service since 1971. The T-72 was designed to replace the T-64 to deal with NATO forces at the time. By having a low profile that can make troops in tanks, it is more able to survive and is very feared by the enemy. At that time, the new innovation of the autoloader allowed faster fire, thereby reducing the pressure of the three armies in this T-72, which can concentrate on mobility and obtain more targets. In the times of the USSR, T-72 had produced 17,000 units. With this large number, the Soviet land defenses at that time became strong and feared. After the collapse of the USSR, Russia continued to produce about 9,000 units. According to information, 30 countries have used this tank for army defense, so the T-72 has been a huge export market for many years. Once feared by opponents and now a nightmare for Russia in Ukraine, recently Russia's armored T-72 was heavily hit and heavily damaged by advanced Ukrainian missiles, then after being destroyed by Ukrainian troops on display in the city center. A few months ago, a number of units of this main Russian battle tank T-72 were hit, then captured by Ukrainian troops near the city of Kiev and the northern city of Kharkiv. The damaged Kremlin vehicle was exhibited to provide a dramatic view for visitors arriving at Castle Square, a historic place in Warsaw, Poland. The T-72 and the Tu-19 self-propelled howitzer on display should not be mistakenly interpreted as a museum item if it were not for the mud and grass that still sticks to the body of this vehicle. As we know, there are three variants of this T-72 that participated in the battle in Ukraine, possibly the T-72B3 and T-72B3M, and the new T-72B3 has been considered a third-generation tank since its introduction in 2010. This armored vehicle is the most popular model to be unloaded on the battlefield since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, with about 1,300 units in service by the Russian army. The T-72 had a thicker armor, with a better fire control system and modern sights. Then in the 1990s a new engine and a Contact 5 reactive armor were installed. At a speed of 43 miles per hour at the time of operation, the new T-72 variant is faster and more maneuverable than the old T-72. Having a laser rangefinder and a thermal sight, the new T-72 variant can fire anti-tank bullets, with the high explosive power of the 125mm smoothbore gun. With all these improvements, why is this T-72 Russian flagship main battle tank still having difficulties on the battlefield in Ukraine? In our view, the first problem of this tank is the high number of the new variant T-72, which means that it will automatically also bear the heaviest losses for Russia. The next problem is the anti-tank missile, Like most other armored vehicles, this T-72 has a weakness in the upper part of its very thin armor turret, which is the main target hit by advanced Ukrainian missiles. This T-72 Russian main battle tank is also easily blocked when conducting operations on the road, where Ukrainian troops can make interceptions when they find out the enemy, at the moment when the target location is trapped. The problematic supply materials also made many T-72s run out of fuel and ammunition suddenly, so the Russian troops often abandoned these tanks and let the Ukrainians capture them. In the air position, Ukraine is also increasingly actively using its flagship, namely the Turkish-made Bayraktar TB2 unmanned system, for ground targets by destroying the Russian T-72 and advanced anti-tank mines that can penetrate the tank's armor. The Russians then tried to change the strategy. They used reconnaissance drones and helicopters to fly watching every movement of these armored tanks, thus knowing the enemy's position both in the air and on the ground. Russian military officials think that this T-72 can break through Ukraine's defenses easily to seize urban areas. Don't take it for granted, Ukraine has a number of advanced missiles, which have proven capable of shooting down Russian air scouts.
Hit, good hit. Clear the pits, clear the pits. You got your radio?
The Russian army assumed that there would be a tank-on-tank battle, so they could rely on these armored vehicles, with a force greater than Ukrainian armored vehicles. This was beyond expectations of the Russian army, so the T-72 became one of the most miserable victims in Ukraine, because there was no preparation and did not plan logistical problems, with vulnerabilities to anti-tank missiles and drones.